Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. Got another video. I'm with Trevon.
Hi, Trevon Ashton.
And Ben.
Hey, what's up?
And we'll be doing a podcast just talking about the new NFL hires for head coaches around the league. And so we'll start off with the New England Patriots, who fired Jerod Mayo after one season with a 4-13 record. And they hired Mike Vrabel, who has a past with the franchise, playing for them before, and he was a head coach for the Titans, who got them to, was it one conference championship?
One conference championship.
But they got into the playoffs in like a back-to-back-to-back years, basically, and they were pretty good. What do we think about this hire?
I think this hire should have happened last year. I think they didn't need to do the Mayo interim year. I think this hire has the chance to be a really great hire, but I am a little skeptical, especially with how they're going to address the offense. I have a feeling they're going to do a classic Patriot way type thing and go full in on defense and not give May the weapons he needs.
Right.
I also think that this is probably, if it doesn't work out, this is the last Patriot way experiment, and Belichick's era and descendants in New England are probably done after this if it doesn't work out well.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, Vrabel's a good coach, but I also, on the flip side, you said you think this is like a year too late. I kind of agree that they should have, if they were going to hire Vrabel, they should have done it last year. But at the same time, I don't think Mayo did such a terrible job that he really deserved to be fired. I think they were going to fire him regardless of how the season went, but he was solid. I mean, no one expected the Patriots to do anything, and they didn't do anything. Like, they pretty much met expectations this year. So
Yeah.
I wasn't a big fan of firing Mayo.
I mean, yeah, they won in week 1 against the Bengals, and I think people after that game thought that, all right, he's a somewhat competent coach. But then, like, they lost their next game, and then it went all downhill from there. But
that's that's what everyone was expecting.
Yeah, no one expected the Patriots to be any good. I also feel like they brought back McDaniels as their OC, right?
Yes.
And during his time as the OC with Brady, I mean, obviously they had Brady, who's probably the greatest quarterback. We know he's the greatest quarterback of all time.
Yes.
And they were so good because of more Brady and Belichick, because every time McDaniels has gone to try to be a head coach, it has completely failed. So I feel like in this case, with the offense, this doesn't really help their offense that much. Do you think McDaniels is that good of an offensive coordinator?
I think if you're going to have Vrabel as your head coach, McDaniels is probably the best OC possible. I think if you're going to lean into the Patriot Belichick way, you might as well go to 100. I do think that McDaniels has done a better job than you're giving him credit in New England. He has sucked everywhere else. But I also hope that McDaniels has enough say to make them address the offense with their 4th overall pick this year. They probably should take the Tedero McMillan.
Yeah, that would be a big pickup.
Some kind of help for Drake May. It was clear this year. Drake May has the potential. He has what's in him to be a quality quarterback in the NFL. But there is nothing around him. When your top like receivers are, Demario Douglas, Jalen Polk, like
Javon Baker.
Like when Hunter Henry is far and away the best
player on your
receiving player in your receiving core is, that's not a good thing.
Yeah, and then I also think one more thing with this team, like we all went to a Jaguars-Patriots game, and I mean there was one game this season, but in that game, Drake May had a very good game, and they still lost 32-16. I mean, he had 2 touchdowns, no picks, and was pretty efficient, but that just shows the lack of help he has around him. Let's move on to the Bears now. They just hired Ben Johnson after firing Matt Eberflus. Probably one of the best firings ever, honestly, because he was such a bad coach for the franchise.
On paper, this is probably the best firing and hiring of the offseason. I would say this is probably the consensus best hiring as well. There are, of course, unknowns with a first-time head coach, but I think it's the first time since Mike Ditka they had an offensive head coach. It's been since 1985 they've had an offensive head coach, excluding the one Matt Nagy year.
Where they went to the playoffs.
Yeah, where they went to the playoffs. So this is, I think, definitely the step in the right direction.
Yeah.
Their head coach, Ben Johnson, if you look at the Lions roster versus the Bears roster, especially on the offense side of the ball, there is a definite gap, and I do worry about how well Ben Johnson will be able to create without the best O-line in football.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah. I mean, I feel like the one thing where there's a reasonable gap on the offense would be probably O-line, because they have good receivers. They have Keenan Allen. DJ Moore is good. I know DJ Moore doesn't want to play on this team. Like, it's been made clear that he just doesn't try as hard as he did before.
Keenan is also a free agent.
Right. So, yeah, Keenan might leave.
But they still have
DJ Moore, Roma Dunze, Cole Kmet, and they're probably going to upgrade running back this offseason, I would imagine.
But still, Swift isn't terrible.
No, he's not bad at all.
You could go a lot worse than DeAndre Swift.
I'll settle for that. I'm not a big DeAndre Swift fan.
I can tell.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's the Bears, so we don't really know what to expect. They have. How many good hires do you think they made at coach recently? Like, it's not much.
The last good one was Mike Ditka.
Yeah. So basically. You never know what to expect because...
I think, actually, we do know what to expect.
Yeah, we do.
Awful.
They're going to know exactly what to expect.
They're going to be bad?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I have no faith in the Bears until they show me to have faith.
Yeah, I'm optimistically low.
Right.
I think they have the upside. One bonus about Ben Johnson is that he has made really good assistant hires on OC, DC, across the board, kind of stealing the best assistants from across the league. So I do think there is a better supporting cast of head coaches on the Bears than there probably is on any of these newer head coach teams. So
right.
Things are on the up for the Bears, and if I'm a Bears fan, I would grade this as a S, and I'm A+, and I'm super happy.
Okay, yeah. New York Jets. So they fired Robert Saleh. Basically, like a long time ago, they actually escorted him out of the building and didn't let him say goodbye to his own teammates or like his own team, which is just cold-blooded from the Jets organization. I mean, I've never seen a coach have to be escorted out of the building like that. But they hired Aaron Glenn, who was the DC for the Lions, who had actually pretty good defense that was riddled by injuries all year. So all their best defensive players, most of them were injured by the end of the season, and they were still ranked, I think, like top 15, top 10.
Yeah, they had I would call it an above-average defense, and with all of their injuries, they were the most injured defense in football by a large margin. Mm-hmm. I would consider that a success.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I feel like for the Jets, I mean, it's the Jets, so just like the Bears, we're going to not expect much.
It is really interesting that they hired a former defensive coordinator to be their coach, because for the past couple of years, it has clearly been the defense that carries this team to anything, which kind of gives the impression that, and I mean the last coach was Robert Saleh, also a defensive-minded coach, but it kind of gives you the impression that defense isn't the issue. For the Jets, it's never the issue. Their defenses have always been solid to good, but their offense is just horrible, and there's so many question marks at offense. Like hiring Aaron Glenn won't attract a quarterback to New York. No quarterback is looking at Aaron Glenn going, I want to work with that guy. You'll get defensive guys who say that, but ultimately this team is nothing if they lose. And nothing without a quarterback, and right now they don't have one because I don't think Aaron Rodgers is coming back.
I mean, the crazy thing is on paper, if you look at the Jets' offense, you see Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall, and you expect that they would be good, but like they have not statistically shown that this season, and they're just not. And Aaron Rodgers is getting up there in age. I think this season was one of his highest interception amounts of his career.
I think it was the highest.
The highest?
He doesn't look like himself. I mean,
Yeah, no, he doesn't.
He's like 45. Like, he's not. He's 40.
He's 40.
I think he's 40 flat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, he's still in his 40s. Like,
Yeah.
You
don't expect much from a 40-year-old quarterback.
Yeah, we're spoiled by Tom Brady playing until he's 40, until he is
45.
Actually 45 and winning Super Bowls. That's not normal. And while Aaron Rodgers is one of the best players of all time, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, not everyone has that longevity.
One different angle with this hire, Aaron Glenn has been probably the biggest driver of the new Detroit culture. Aaron Glenn has probably been the biggest hype man. I don't think Dan Campbell's aura happens without Aaron Glenn. And I do think if you watch his presser, he clearly wants to be there. He clearly wants to bring this team farther than it did last year. And I do think that he's a big culture guy, and I do think that could help the Jets and could help turn around that mentality of just, we're a losing bum franchise, and maybe we can win something.
I agree. I mean, if you could do it with the
Lions.
The Lions, then you could do it with the Jets.
Yeah, all right. Now we have a Jaguars fan in here. So the Jaguars fired Coach Doug Peterson and hired Liam Cohen, who was the offensive coordinator for the Buccaneers, who had a really strong offense. So what do we think about this hire?
Personally, I really like it. I like I like what Cohen's done on the Bucs the past year or two. I think that he's been given a pretty solid start both in Tampa and now in Jacksonville. Like they're good pieces to work around. I think he can figure out what to do and not screw it up like Press Taylor did. The thing is, he said he will call plays, thank God. The biggest downfall with the previous regime, with Doug Peterson's regime, was not Doug Peterson. Doug Peterson was fine. It was Press Taylor, the offensive coordinator, who decided screen passes were the way to go. Constant screen passes. It was horrible. And hopefully Liam Cohen can bring in a different dimension.
Yeah, also I saw a stat that when Liam Cohen took over as the OC of the Bucs, they had a bottom 5 run offense, I think.
Yeah, and expected yards per play.
Yeah, and then he moved it up to top 5 in just 2 years.
Yeah.
Actually, in one.
One?
He was only OC for 1 year.
Oh, actually one. So, yeah, that's even more impressive. I mean...
And we have good running backs, too.
Yeah. Bigsby and Etienne.
Etienne and Bigsby, are good running backs.
It's a great duo.
Quite similar to Rashad White and Bucky Irving, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love this hire from the get-go. I think Liam Cohen was the guy for the Jags. I think there are a lot of similarities on the roster. You kind of have that quarterback that is talented but has kind of been thrown to the side a little bit. But I still think that Trevor Lawrence can exceed and become a top 10, if he isn't already top 5 quarterback, if he has all the right pieces and a good head coach. I think also Brian Thomas Jr. is really a bright spot for them there. I love this hire. I think it also depends on how Liam Cohen builds his staff around him. He did hire a up-and-coming defensive assistant this morning as a defensive coordinator.
Who?
I do like the hire. It is the Packers linebacker coach. Sorry, 1 second. Anthony Campanile. I don't know how to say it.
Okay.
We'll figure out how to say
We'll figure out how to say it. But I do like the hire. And I think things are definitely on the up. Getting rid of Press Taylor, I think that's just huge.
That's all that matters.
That's all that matters.
As a Jaguars fan, we've been asking for his head for years. Literally for more than probably 2 years we've been asking for him to be gone.
Yeah.
We were. You might remember we were 8-3 on Thanksgiving.
I do remember that.
2 years ago. We had the number 1 seed in the AFC, and that week, for whatever reason, Doug Peterson decided to change who calls the offensive plays from himself to Press Taylor, And since then, I think we are like 5-20 or something like that.
Something stupid like
So,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, things are on the up, and in a relatively weak division, they should be back to contending for the title every year.
Yeah. Okay, now Las Vegas, the Raiders, they fired Antonio Pierce after a year and a half because he was their interim for half of last year, and then they decided to give him that coaching contract. It didn't really go so well. And they just hired Pete Carroll and also Tom Brady. I think, isn't he like the assistant GM or something?
He's a part-time owner.
Owner.
But
he's
at this point, he is effectively the shot caller inside the building.
Yeah.
Everything kind of goes through him. He's making all the decisions.
That's what it
The
seems
majority owner loves him and doesn't know really what he's doing, so Brady has basically full control.
Yeah.
I mean, that's unfair.
What?
That's unfair. The majority owner is like the longtime owner of the Raiders.
Yeah.
Whose name escapes me. He's the just win baby guy, and he's had a lot of success with the Raiders. People forget about that because recent Mark Davis, of course, he's had a lot of success with the Raiders. He's done a lot of good things with the Raiders, regardless of what you think of him. I'm not a big fan of him, but regardless of that, he has had good success.
Yeah. I think this is the most up in the air hire just because I feel like, yes, I see the name on the paper and it's Pete Carroll. He's one of the better coaches of this era, you would say, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think, yes, that in that sense, this is a really good hire and it could bring them back to being a good team, but also Pete Carroll's now 73 years of age, and I don't know, from a 73-year-old coach, some of the I don't know how many years he'll be able to coach them for because he's already 73. Also, coaching takes a lot of a toll on someone's just you know what I mean, right?
Yeah. It's an interesting hire because it's not a team that really feels like a contender in the near future, especially with their draft placement. It's unlikely that they'll get or it's not a slam dunk that they'll take a quarterback. If one of Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders falls to them at the 6, I believe.
6. Yes.
I'm confident they'll take whichever one falls, but I don't think it's likely that either of them fall. I think it's much more likely that those two go anywhere in the top 3 picks. So they're going to end up with another year of Aiden O'Connell unless they can find, unless they want to try out like Jalen Milroe or find someone in the free agent pool. But both of those are unlikely. They'll probably just stick with Aiden O'Connell, and I'm not sure how far they can get with Aiden O'Connell.
I like this hire, but I don't like the future for the Raiders. I think that no matter who they hired, I would still be down on the Raiders.
I think that's true.
They have probably the biggest question mark at quarterback out of any team.
Yeah. They have since Derek Carr left.
Yeah. But the Raiders organization was looking to hire a experienced veteran head coach to contend at least in that position against their division, because their division is probably the most stacked coaching division.
Oh, for
you have
sure.
Andy Reid with KC, Sean Payton with Denver, Jim Harbaugh with the Chargers, and now you have Pete Carroll with the Raiders.
Yeah.
I think if he had a first-time head coach, he would be eaten alive by that division.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
And as Pete Carroll is super old at this point, I see him as a bridge head coach to start building the culture, lead the team kind of into like a full rebuild, and hopefully hand over the team when they have a top pick in 27 and can draft like an Arch Manning.
Yeah.
Arch Manning would be that would be good for them.
I kind of see that as their best trajectory at this point.
At this point, yeah. They won too many games this year.
Yes.
And they could have had one more against the Chiefs if Aiden
Sure.
O'Connell hadn't.
They hadn't fumbled. That's true.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're moving on to the Dallas Cowboys, who hired.
Them Cowboys.
Yeah, so they fired Mike McCarthy, Which
they didn't fire.
Or no,
They
no,
didn't
yeah,
extend
his
him.
contract expired and they didn't want to extend him, which is a weird way to go about that at first. Like, first of all, that was a weird way to go about that. And then, because it was also a couple days after all these other coaches got fired, so they had less options to hire at coach. And then they got Brian Schottenheimer, who is...
he's a career coordinator. He's basically been an offensive coordinator for the past 2 decades at this point. He is a younger guy at 51 for a head coach, so he's like probably middle of the pack in age. I'm not a fan of the hire.
Where did he coach before?
He was the Cowboys OC.
He was the Cowboys OC.
Cowboys.
Yeah, and then
higher.
and then he was the Seahawks OC, Colts OC.
He was the Seahawks OC with Russell Wilson.
With Russell Wilson.
At like the second half of the Russell Wilson.
Like
years.
the last 3 years.
Not the good parts.
Yeah. He was the Georgia offensive coordinator in 2015. The year he was brought in, their head coach was fired. And then he was the Rams and Jets coordinator before that. His best offense across his play calling years was the 9th overall offense with prime Russell Wilson.
Yeah. Does not inspire confidence.
It doesn't inspire confidence, and I feel this hire to me is just signaling that Jerry Jones has way too much control of what happens in that team. I think he just wanted to go with someone cheaper that would listen to him and they can push around.
Also, they hired Matt Eberflus as their defensive coordinator.
That's a great hire. I'm not mad at that.
Yeah, I think Eberflus is not good enough to be a head coach, but I think he could still be a solid defensive coordinator. We'll see how badly the head coaching job screwed him up.
Let's see if he knows what a timeout is, too.
We'll see. That's not his job anymore.
Yeah, that's true, but still.
Unless you're the Chiefs, anyways.
Yeah. So, yeah, this is just a dumpster fire of a franchise and a hiring window. I mean,
The only NFC franchise to not make the NFC Championship game since 2000 is the Cowboys.
I think it's 96, actually.
Yeah, 96 was the last time.
But,
they
yeah.
won.
Yeah, the last time they made the NFC Championship game, they won the Super Bowl in 95.
Yeah. No, 96.
96, yeah.
96.
Who was on that team? It was like...
that was the last Troy Aikman year.
Yeah, okay.
I think this is the final nail in the coffin of America's team.
Mm-hmm.
I think that title will be passed on, in essence, very shortly, if it hasn't already, to the Lions.
Chiefs. What are you talking
No,
about?
like America's team, like who's the nation rooting for?
No, the nation never rooted for the Cowboys.
Yeah.
The Chiefs are a much better example.
Okay.
They're the team that always, like in the early
Yeah, the
in the
refs.
early 90s, the Cowboys were the team that were always winning, that had a lot of bandwagon fans. That's why they were called America's team. They were always on TV. They had a lot of bandwagon fans, but on the other side of that, all the people who weren't bandwagons, like had their teams from before before the Cowboys were good, hate the Cowboys.
Yeah.
Anyone from that era who wasn't a Cowboys fan hated the Cowboys regardless of who their team was, whether they even interacted with the Cowboys.
Yeah.
Much like the Chiefs now. Everyone hates the Chiefs unless you're a Chiefs fan. And they have a lot of media exposure. They have a lot of bandwagon fans, a lot of casual fans. It's the Chiefs.
Yeah.
Do you think the
they have
Eagles...
marketable and likable players? What were you gonna say, Ethan?
Do you think the Eagles could also be one of those teams if they win the Super Bowl this year? Like,
I don't think they have the media draw that the Chiefs have. They have good players. I mean, Saquon Barkley is probably the best player in the NFL this year.
Oh, for sure.
And Jalen Hurts is pretty good. AJ Brown is good. They have good guys on the defense, but they don't have that like superstar that the Chiefs have.
Right.
Like Saquon Barkley, as good as he is, he doesn't transcend football.
You don't turn on TV and see Nick Sirianni shouting Bundle Brewski every 5 minutes.
No.
It's Andy Reid shouting Bundle Brewski.
Yeah.
They're the ones in all the ads. I would agree with you there.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, moving on to now the last open head coach spot. The New Orleans Saints. This is probably the worst head coaching position that we've seen in the past decade, possibly. I think they're negative 70 in the cap right now. They're in cap hell. It's negative for the next few years, so they're going to have to cut a lot of guys. I think if you take this job, you're getting hired to be fired.
Yeah.
I feel like at this point, they're just going to pay a guy $15 million. It's going to be a lot for, say, a half-decent option. Or just pay like a bum something.
Sorry.
Do
we think Darren Rizzi could come back?
Yes.
Alvin Kamara was saying on social media that he would. He was hinting that he would like to have him back.
I mean, he did pretty well for what he was given when he came in. I mean, they won how many games in that time? Like 3 or out of like.
They won more than they should have.
Yeah.
They won more than they won with Allen.
Yeah. At
In
this
a way
point,
shorter time too.
I think that is your best option. A guy that seems to want the job. After a lot of head coach prospects have been turning down the job. Joe Brady of the Bills, their OC, turned the job down. Mike McCarthy, former head coach of the Cowboys, turned the job down. And it's looking like more and more coaches will do that. I would say Rizzi is probably the best option. But I think anyways, whoever takes the job will be gone in 3 years, hopefully after they're gone out of the cap hell.
Yeah.
Whose fault is this?
Whose fault is this? It is their front office.
They're like GM.
I forget who in the front office is responsible, but they're all right drafters, but they tried to extend the window of Breeze and Payton for far too long, and now they're dealing with the consequences of that like 5 years later.
Because they were like paying like Kamara.
Yeah.
Well, they paid Kamara. Who do they have on the team that they've paid a ton of money to?
Michael Thomas.
A lot of
Is
defensive
he still
guys.
getting paid by them?
Yeah, like a lot.
Jesus
So
Christ.
they paid everyone with tomorrow's money, and today is finally tomorrow, and they have to pay up. And they're kind of screwed. They're going to have to find more contracts to restructure, to shift this problem even more into the future, more guys to cut. It's a real issue, and I don't see it being good anytime soon.
So do we think Olave is gone by next year?
I don't think Olave is gone. I don't think
He's still on his rookie contract.
He's still on his rookie contract.
Pretty cheap.
How many more years? One?
Two. He was a first rounder,
two.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so 2. I think that he was a very plausible trade candidate for next year. But yeah.
I mean, I would trade him because it's clear he keeps getting concussions. Now that's partly unlucky.
That's Carr's hospital balls.
That's also Derek Carr's hospital balls. But after so many times, I think a couple of those concussions were not Derek Carr's like exact fault. I feel like recently though, the last one he got was a horrendous throw right into a big hit. So I feel like, I don't know, he doesn't seem as happy to be on the Saints. And I feel like, I don't know, there's just this overwhelming angriness from all the players and everyone in that organization right now.
The Saints are not a good place to be right now.
No, it's not. Like,
I don't think anyone would want to go there even if they weren't $70 million in the red.
And just to wrap this up, which head coaches do you think are on the hot seat right now?
Brian Daboll, for sure. I mean, I think the Giants...
I'm shocked he didn't get fired.
I'm shocked that we brought back Daboll and Joe Schoen, the GM, because, I mean, yeah, I just think the Giants had that one 2022 season where we had a playoff win against the Vikings. We were all like, oh, Daboll, yeah, he's done well. I mean, because he got us that playoff win, and I feel like, yeah, he did, but that was also Saquon. We actually had a competent defense. We got rid of our whole secondary after that year, too. And just everything went downhill. Our offense sucks now. I mean, everything's just wrong with our team.
I think a few other coaches are some of these DC guys. Morris. Some could say that Todd Bowles is a little bit on the hot seat. I think that their defense has been lackluster for having a defensive head coach, and that especially after Liam Cohen has left, I would be worried about who's going to be there. I wouldn't call a seat hot. I would call it warm.
I would say wait and see. I think there's a potential there for it to fall in his face, but they've still done a lot with very little.
That's fair. I think another coach that I know a lot of fans want him gone is Zach Taylor of the Bengals.
Not Zach Taylor, the president.
But I think, yes, his resume and accomplishments are good on paper, but he has done far too little with the generational talents that he has. Mm-hmm. And I think the whole team and organization refuse to address the problems they have and just want to get the flashy offensive guys going.
Isn't there a problem defense, though? That's mostly on the DC, isn't it?
I think their biggest problems are on defense, and also that O-line is horrendous.
Oh, well, yeah, that's true, too.
And I think roster construction is on the job of the GM, but the head coach has a massive say in that. And I think that has the head coach being like the frontal guy. I think he's on the hot seat.
Yeah. I think you could. Do you think Stefanski would be or no?
I think Stefanski.
Sure.
I think he's on the hot seat purely because he's on the Browns, not because he's a bad coach.
Yeah, he's not.
I think that's fine.
He's a solid coach because, yes, they got they had Baker Mayfield, who's a good quarterback, but and they got 12 wins one year. I mean, that was really good. They won a playoff game. They had probably their best season in a while. And yeah, I feel like still it's the Browns, and I don't think they would want to move on because at this point, do they have great options that they could pick up? Yeah.
But I could see the Browns trying to move off him when they do draft their quarterback. I think that is a generally smart move. When you're going to bring in a quarterback with a top 5 pick, you should clean house.
Yeah, I completely agree.
So speaking of that, Tomlin, the head coach who gets his team out of a top 10 pick and into a first-round playoff exit.
Every year for the past 7, I think. Or is it 8?
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
He is making the playoffs, but I think he also has a very good roster, specifically defensively.
Yes.
But I think it's a signal of him being a bad coach that 0 of his assistants have ever been hired as a head coach, offensive or defensive coordinator. The Tomlin tree, he's been there for 20 almost 20 years at this point.
Yeah.
18 years.
Yeah.
He has 0 branches on his tree. I think if I'm a Steelers fan, I'm calling for his head purely because I think the Steelers need to try something different. This clearly isn't going to get them anywhere. Tomlin won his Super Bowl with Big Ben. It wasn't really his roster that he constructed. He inherited the roster and then won with it.
He had Big Ben. Hines Ward was one of their receivers.
Very old Hines Ward.
He still made a big catch in that game.
He did,
right? Yeah. And I feel like overall that team was pretty good. That's why they won.
Was amazing.
Yeah, Harrison, right?
Yeah, those Steelers defenses.
They've always been good.
Tomlin's time were amazing. Personally, I'm not so in favor of firing Mike Tomlin because he's been a success. There's nothing to really go against him other than just we don't know if you're going to be able to win a playoff game. But the thing is, he's getting them there. He's getting them to that spot. And what they've had, especially on offense the past couple of years, I don't think many coaches could get that team to the playoffs to a winning record. We saw Kenny Pickett last year. They had a winning record, and they were throwing out Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph. That's terrible.
And
nobody should be doing that well with Mason Rudolph at the helm.
They also had one year where Big Ben got hurt very early, and they had Mason Rudolph in, and then Mason Rudolph got a little hurt, so they put in this undrafted guy named Duck Hodges, who somehow had a 3-1 or 3-2 record as a starter, and I mean he did absolutely nothing, and they still were winning games. And that's just, yes, their defense has been elite in all of those years, but there's only so much a defense can do. That the fact that they were still winning games like that was very impressive. I think Tomlin, in theory, should be a bit on the hot seat, but I don't think the Steelers are going to do it because of the fact that they get to the playoffs every year with that bad of an offense. Yeah.
And just for me to close, I think out of the new head coach hires, the Patriots, the Bears, Jets, Jaguars, and Raiders have gotten their best possible head coach. I think they've all made the right decisions, and things are as good as they can be for them. I think that the Cowboys and Saints
are screwed.
It's not looking the greatest for them.
Yeah, I think I'm with you.
Yep.
I'm with you.
So thank you guys.
Thank you
for having me, Ethan.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me, Ethan.
No problem.
Duck Hodges.